Hi everyone, I'm Steve, manager of Strictly Butterside Up, avid player of 90 Minute Fever, and I'm here with Nick today, who is the lead developer of the game. We were speaking the other day a bit about how we could help new users. Now there's a new tutorial in the game, and it's really helpful actually. If anyone hasn't seen it, I know probably a few existing users are hopefully listening to this. It's really useful, and not only is it useful for new users, it's also useful for existing users. We'll be going a bit more into that. But we thought we'd speak. We were talking about how we could help new users a little bit, and what we thought was we'd do a series where Nick starts journey as a new user, and tries to take that team from the training league all the way to the Masters League, and talks a little bit about his thought processes and how he does this. Now, just to be clear, it's all Nick's going to do with this is he doesn't want to be taking all the titles or anything like that. Should he get that far? We'll see how Nick goes. But he's just basically going to work the team through, make all decisions as if he wants to compete as a Masters League team, try and get promoted as much as he can, try and make the best decisions as he goes along, and try and work his way to the Masters League. And then I believe the plan is to just leave the team after that and let it go by the wayside. I'm sure Nick will explain a little bit more about that, but thought I'd just point that out. We want to create something that's useful for existing users as well as new users, so it's well worth listening to this to get a few snippets of advice. So, Nick's created a team, and he's already made a few videos. As you can see in the background here, he's played a few games. Just to let you know, I've just watched the first video. It's very good, very interesting, so definitely recommend it. I learned a few things in that, and I've been playing this game for far too long. So it's very well worth listening to for new and existing users. As you can see, Nick's already played a few games, but we thought we'd do a little video, firstly as an intro to the series, because this is really the first video we're expecting users to watch, and just maybe just talk a little bit about what Nick's learned in the first week and what's been going on and how he's approached things. We're not going to go into too much detail in this video, but just a little summarising, and then Nick can link in, sort of tell you about where to learn a little bit more about it in his other videos. So let's get on with it. Nick, how's it going, and how have you found the process so far?
Yeah, I'm going okay. I've got COVID at the moment, so. And when I was recording all these videos, we're going to come through probably a little bit in the nasal sound and the how do you say, not overwhelming amount of enthusiasm in some parts, but it's also, I guess, in a way that was what spawned the genesis of this. In a way, it was because I was not well, and I thought now's a good time to be able to find a bit of time to give this a go. So so I'm alright though, otherwise, generally speaking. As you said, it's been a week. It might feel that way when you look at the amount of videos, but actually I think this is day 3, so I think it's something like, I don't know how many will end up uploaded, but I think there's maybe 20 to 30 hours of video that's already recorded going through this, and it's day 3, so it's there is a lot. I was a bit overwhelmed, to be honest. I didn't quite realize there was that much to do. If you want to do it, so to speak, it is there. Yeah. So yeah, it's been good, I think, and it's been interesting going through this process, and even I guess for myself, sometimes you're doing these things. Obviously, when you're playing, I guess you are thinking and you are making the decisions, but when you actually have to narrate them, when you actually have to explain them, it even makes you realize yourself that quite often you are, I guess you realize your own thinking to yourself that isn't always immediately obvious if you're not forcing yourself to actually explain every decision you're making. It creates a bit of a twist, a bit of a, I don't know, it makes you realize things you realize more and about things. So I'm explaining this really poorly, but I think all I'm really trying to say is when you actually have to explain and justify every decision, and every decision you're making, it definitely it makes everything much more analytical, if that makes sense. Like you're not really going through the motions anymore at all with anything. It's like every decision is like crisp, it's clean. There's like a really defined reason for it. And now your reasoning may be wrong, but there is reasoning. You are doing everything for a reason, and then you can, you get to learn the outcomes of that and whether your line of reasoning was correct or not. But the important thing, the important concept here is that every decision you are making that decision for a specific reason. And I think being able to apply that conceptually means that you can learn from your mistakes, because you now know what your mistakes are, because you've made decisions for specific reasons, and if they didn't work out the way that you thought that they would, then a mistake is being made, and you can learn from it. You can identify the fact that you have made a mistake, and when you're not making the reasoning explicit, sometimes it can sort of, it's very difficult to pick up on the fact that you've even made any mistakes at all, pretty much. So,
yeah, I think it is interesting. I was obviously listening to the first video. As I said, that's the only one I've watched so far, but it's very interesting, and it's certainly the way you're talking through the decisions you're making. I think this is basically what you're saying, is because you're actually saying them, you're sort of making yourself think through every decision, aren't you? Because you're actually explaining it out loud, you're actually saying, right, I'm doing this because I'm doing this. So you're not blindly guessing at anything. You're saying, right, I'm doing this because I want to achieve that. And I think it's quite an interesting thing to watch. And I'm probably guilty of going on autopilot a little bit, and I'm sure many of the users who play the game are exactly the same. So I'm pretty sure we can all learn some ideas from this one. So where would you like to start, Nick? Should we take a look? And I can see you played a few friendlies. To get you're obviously working in tactics. What was the first thing you did when you logged in? I know there's a tutorial process to go through. So we're not going to go in depth into any of this, but we'd like to quickly visit on a few of these things. So just to give people a summary and get an idea of whether they want to pursue the series and have a look and find out any bit more in depth about anything. What was the first sort of thing you went into? Was it into your senior squad to see what you've got?
Yeah, that was absolutely, for the whole squad. We just went through all the players. So the first thing, obviously it's a couple of days in now, so a few players have been bought and sold and whatever. But the very first thing that I did was go to my senior squad. Now in the beginning, all your youth players are already been added into it, so it was just every player in my squad was here, and I just literally clicked through every single player, looked at every single player, looked at what I had, and the very first part of the tutorial is to play a senior friendly match. So I thought what I'll do as just an interesting exercise for the video, for the content, was to just create a tactic that tried to get the most out of this whatever the starting team is that I had. Mm-hmm. So, and just to sort of act as, because that's a big constraint, and just work around that and just try and build what I felt was like, an optimal tactic, if you want to call it. It's not a good word. You want to strive to be optimal. Obviously, you will never actually be optimal though. With something like this, there's just too many moving parts to ever get it perfectly. But just to try to get, something that is more optimal than suboptimal, something like that. Something that is just looking at the players that I had, looking at those that every single player you have is going to have weaknesses, but some of them will have strengths. Here's a good example maybe of one. Like, he's got 80 tackling, so like exceptional. I mean, that's exceptionally high tackling. High. Even in higher divisions, that's great. And in the in the lower divisions, this is just absolutely exceptional. But and the marking is okay, but aerial ability horrible, speed horrible. So he's it is typically it's definitely just a very good example of a player that's got really defined, clear strengths and weaknesses. And what we really want is to get the most out of this 80 tackling, but to be exposed, let's say, to his low speed and aerial ability the least amount possible, like for that to not be exploited by the other team the least possible. So trying to, and at the end of the day, all of your starting players, and indeed I think it's probably true, even all the way up to the even in the Masters League, like the players there by design in the game design, we don't want every player to have just all strengths and no weaknesses. Like even the very best players do have some weaknesses. So
yeah, that's very true.
think like it might not be as extreme, obviously, as you get better players and move up. Like you can probably get a player, for example, that's got towards 80 tackling and maybe 40 speed or 50 speed, which wouldn't be necessarily that hard to pick up, or is still slow but has higher aerial ability or something. So there wouldn't necessarily be like as extreme as this player in regards to strengths and weaknesses. But all players do have strengths and weaknesses, and as part of the idea of making a tactic is just to try to, for each individual player in your team, like that is sort of a question, like how do I get the most out of their strengths and how do I minimize their weaknesses, and then try to structure everything into like a cohesive unit as well, where all the players are complementing each other and working together. So the very first thing that I did was just go through all the players and try to build a tactic that was just with what I started with. And to be honest, that's in the end has sort of led to just going with it. Like, all right, so we'll go with that tactic because we weren't sure, honestly, what tactic we should be striving to play as part of this. I think I did speak with Steve beforehand, and the one thing we kind of decided is that we definitely didn't want to play like the flat back for defensive midfielder and the two central midfielders and the AML and the AMR and the striker, because that is the most popular formation in the meta of the game right now.
Yeah.
We definitely didn't want that specific formation. But also most of the other top formations in the meta all include AML and AMR. They have some other variants. For example, there's one that is basically the starting formation that is the same formation, but instead of the DMC has AMC. That one's quite popular. And there's some other variants, but at the end of the day, pretty much all of the most popular tactics that have an AML and AMR. So that the one thing that we definitely didn't want to do was to have an AML and AMR. So, and then outside of that, we weren't quite sure what the formation was supposed to be. But I think in the end, I just thought, well, this formation is not popular at all. I don't think anybody not even anything really similar to this is popular at all. So this is definitely not in the scope of the meta of the game right now. And so I thought I'd just roll with it. But this is a kind of formation that was built because of our starting team. So that's what dictated it. And then we just went with it from there. We just thought, okay, well, we'll go with it and we'll just look to get players from the scouting pool that are improvements over our starting players for these roles, basically, in this tactics. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things I'm sure anyone watching this has picked up, and one of the really interesting things in the first video, so this is why I'm saying I recommend it, is I'm sure everyone's picked off that you don't necessarily have to have a formation that's exactly balanced in a particular, as far as, lines are concerned. You can see the attacking midfielder, for example, is offset here to the right, and Nick explains quite a lot about why he's doing things like this. Now, I can see already that this has been adapted slightly, this formation, from what you had in the first video. I can see some different roles in there, and there's probably a few other things I haven't picked up on, but it's definitely slightly different from where it was to start with. And there's a good segment in there that explains why Nick's doing those things. So I really recommend listening to what Nick has to say there and how you can funnel the ball where you want it to. Now, I think we all, existing users, and I'm definitely one of them, occasionally struggle a little bit tactically to try and change games and maybe make the wrong decisions. Now, I don't think it's necessarily making a wrong decision, but you've got to try something. And maybe this will help you, give you clues where you can really adapt your tactics in mid-matches and really take note of what's going on, because there's definitely, the match engine is very reactive. I can see from what Nick does in these, you can really change how the flow of the match, shall we say, I suppose is a good way of putting it. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend seeing more about that. So Nick, was there anything else you wanted to talk about on here, or anything to do with this, or shall we move on to the next part?
Yeah, it depends how fast we want it to be. I mean, obviously, like you said, it's constantly evolving. I don't know if we want to explain. I don't know if there's a possible to explain it in 5 minutes or less, but could try and explain the tactic or not.
Yeah, go on. Give it a go. Give it just a quick summary. I don't think you want to go as detailed as you did in the first video, because this is a summary video, but I think maybe just give a little taster of the kind of way you're thinking with this.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll try and give a quick 5-minute version of this. Obviously, explaining the tactic. Obviously, if you want to know more detail about everything, there's just a huge amount of explanation in these videos as to the specifics of everything. And actually, as Steve pointed out, this is a bit different. It's a constant process at the moment, especially just a couple of days in, playing loads of friendlies, just trying little different things out and just making tweaks. But this is where we're at the moment, and I think I can give a pretty quick explanation as to why everything is set how it is. In regards to the team instructions, I haven't even got to that yet in the tactical development, so I've just got everything in the middle, basically. Just everything is a default setting for the team for the tactic settings. So at the moment, I'm just working solely with the roles and the positions in the formation. So I'll start from the back and move up to the top, so to speak. As a general rule, you definitely want your formations to have defensive stability, basically. So it's always a good idea to work from the back to the front, and then when you get it working, you can then review things as you go on. But here we go. So there's a flat back three. They all have a different role. We clicked. It's going to be. I'm going to have to just explain without clicking on all the players to do this fast version. So this is the one player that we did look at though, as we can see, he had the high tackling but couldn't do anything else that well. That's why we've set him to stopper. So he runs out. He tries to make a tackle when the play's coming down this side. So he will either win, I guess, the tackle, or he won't win. But either way, at that point, if the attack's coming down this way, he's removed from the play at that point. This guy's set to cover, so he backs off. This guy is a jack of all trades centre half, so he's decent in the air, decent speed, decent tackling, decent positioning, decent marking, all of that. He needs everything. And the idea of that is if he's the most central one, and we're giving up a lot of space on the wings here. So when the crosses come in, he's always gonna need to be involved in dealing with them, basically with marking players, with winning the duels in the air, etc. Also, he's the last line of defense, so and he's covering back. So if there's big through balls being launched and stuff like that, he's often the one running onto it and needs to make the last ditch tackle. So it's important that he has tackling. It's important that he has speed. It's important, yeah. So this defender in particular is very important. Now, having said that, when there are threats coming, he's got a DMC in front of him. When the threats are coming, the other defenders are more involved in the action than he is typically. But if the other defenders get beat, if they make a mistake, it's not as expensive as if this guy ends up making a mistake. If this guy misses a tackle, we're probably conceding a goal. So these guys have more defensive volume as a general concept, but this guy has more important, more critical situations to deal with. And it's also why you also want him to have higher composure as well, by the way. This defender is just set to normal central defender. The way that the tactic plays out, which we're going to have to move forwards a little bit to describe this, but he has less tackles to do and more interceptions to pick up to deal with, and more marking involved in the box. He basically ends up dealing with crosses more. So the way that this tactic is set up as a general concept is to encourage the opponent to attack through this side. And then this guy will end up trying to deal with it. And then if he gets beat, then these guys will end up having to deal with the cross or whatever it is. So these guys are more for that. And so that's, as a general concept, what's going on here. In regards to starting to move forwards from here, let's skip the DMC for a second. The way that we encourage the attacking player to funnel through the right is by having this guy set to attacking winger. So when we're attacking, he's actually up here. This guy's an attacking midfielder. When we're attacking, he's actually up here. So straight away you can see, like, when our team gives up possession of the ball, there's a massive gap here, which is how we're encouraging the opposition to attack through this side more often. Obviously, they can still attack anywhere. It's just about frequency that we're just talking about here.
Yeah. So you're basically saying, if you've lost the ball or if you've got a problem, that's where you want the problem to be. You want it to be there. You don't want it to be on the other side,
exactly.
basically. Yeah.
This guy's box-to-box midfielder. Now, this is can be a very powerful role, but only situationally. And by situationally, that is basically that this player has enough time to get up to support your attacks before the attack is broken down and or otherwise finished because you've shot the ball or whatever. So if you're playing like direct passing, fast tempo, that type of thing, box-to-box midfielder isn't a great role because if your team is defending, he's dropping back to defend. You win the ball, you launch your forwards on a counter-attack. That counter-attack is broken down, finished, scored, whatever. But it's finished by the time this guy gets up to help. So it's not a good role for that. But if you aren't doing that and you're passing the ball around with build-up, laying it back a bit, passing it sideways, that type of thing, giving this guy a bit of time to join the attack, then he's an extra attacker. So that can help for that. But then also, if you want him, where the maximum value out of this guy is to not only give him time to join the attack, but to also give him time to help out defending when you're defending. So your defense needs to be set up to hold up the opposition long enough for him to join to get back to help defend. If you can do both of those things, you're getting the maximum value out of a box-to-box midfielder. So in particular, he's on this side. So the idea is that generally we are encouraging to attack through here, but obviously there's still attack through the other side sometimes. When we've got attack that is built up, this guy is still joining. He is joining late typically, so these guys will all be up first. He will come later, so he may end up being there or not quite up there yet. And again, this guy as well, he's tracking back to defend, so he's going to end up joining there, but a bit later as well. So you could think of these two guys as kind of like they are joining, but it depends on how fast things happen as to when they get there. But let's just conceptually think of these as they're like halfway between here and there for a decent length attack. So you've kind of got this bank of 5 that's like this. So you are encouraging through here, but they can still come the other way. There's nothing stopping them attacking this way. There's a decent sized gap this side as well. The main thing is the fact that there is this big gap, a decent gap here, but the main reason why most of the attacks in the end are going to be coming through our right side is because most of our attacks are initiating up the right side as well. So when we concede possession, we're typically conceding it by in this area up here somewhere, and then plus there's this big gap. So it's both factors that are encouraging it through here. However, the attack still can obviously come through the other side. There is a gap. It's just about percentages here. And when they come through the other side, the plan is different. This guy is a box-to-box midfielder, and this guy is a winger. So let's settle these guys back for a second. When the attack comes through the other side, the idea instead, when it comes through this side, the idea is to rush out to get the tackle and to try to win and get the attack back up the wing again. That's the idea for this side. But when it comes down this side, it's a completely different plan. The idea instead is to try to hold them up, to not launch, to not dive in for a tackle, and instead hold them up. And the idea with holding them up is when these guys are joining the attack, this box-to-box midfield, by holding them up, we're basically saying it's not a stopper role, it's a central defender and a cover. So basically, these guys are just more interested in defending space than launching in for a tackle. And conceptually, all of these players here are interested in defending the space. They're not necessarily interested in rushing straight in. And they will obviously end up needing to make a tackle or whatever at some point. But in the first instance, they're defending the space. It buys a little bit of time. And that time is afforded to these players to get back, to help defend. And what will happen is when they're coming back, they'll be held up a little bit in this area, and these players come back here to help defend. And basically, it's a trap. It's a trap. We're saying come in here, and then we're crunching them with 2 extra defenders. So they basically won't be able to go backwards. They'll only be able to go forwards, and they'll have to try to take these players on. Mm-hmm. So in particular, AML and AMR is very popular, and they're typically, especially if you're not playing an AMC, they're completely isolated. So if you imagine, for example, our team ends up defending like with these guys do get back, and the other team's playing an AML, an AMR, and a striker, and that's it. Like, what is the winger supposed to do at this point? Like, he's completely isolated. He's got one person to pass to who's got 3 people marking him. So, at that point, the wing is just going to have to be a hero and try and take everybody on. And that is in particular one of the reasons why the popular formation, it results in a lot of one-on-one duels because the players are completely isolated. They don't have other good options. So defensively, that's what's going on. So to be clear, the difference here is this guy's a winger, so he's going to track back to defend. That's the difference. That's why it's a trap, because he's coming back and he's coming back because he's the box-to-box midfielder. On this side, it's the opposite. We're encouraging these guys to get forwards more. So when we concede that they're not going to track back as much. So basically, it's a completely different plan. This side, it's about slowing them up, trapping them. This side, it's the opposite. It's about letting them through and just rushing in for a last-ditch tackle. In regards to the attacking play, when the attack builds up through the right, this guy's typically already up. This guy will immediately be up. So straight away, we've got an overload on the right. If they're playing a flat back four, for example, they'll have a left back and they'll have one central defender trying to deal with 3 players or 4 players here. The other central defender will end up helping a bit, and that is intentional. We want him to help, get dragged across. So typically speaking, what you might think would happen here is one of the central defenders is going to deal with the striker. One of them's going to end up trying to deal with the AMC. They might have a DMC as well, possibly. He might end up picking up on that. But either way, you've got an overload here. It's just whether it's an overload, how many players are overloading. Is it just 1 or is it 2? And typically speaking, the winger and the forward who's already waiting there as he comes up, it allows him. Let's have a look here. So as the outlet pass, let's say, happens to the, let's say, the winger. We win the ball here. He wins the tackle. He gives it to the winger. The winger, as he starts to advance, the fullback will come to tackle, but he's got a really good option. A diagonal pass to a more forwards position. Then the fullback will get dragged over trying to defend this guy. He can continue to advance up the wing, get the ball back, put in a cross. So basically, it's about making sure that the players don't get isolated, or at least the ones that you don't want to get isolated, not getting isolated. Conceptually, tactically, you also sometimes want to create tactics where you intentionally want players to be isolated, but we're not going to cover that now. So it allows the sort of 1-2 play up the wing, plus you've got a player here who's in the poacher role, who's not necessarily helping with the build-up, but he's looking to get a space to score a goal, basically. Now, for this tactic in particular, we try different things at the moment. It's poacher, but during the match, it can be target man, it can be striker. We try different roles. So I wouldn't focus too much on the poacher role. It depends on how the match is playing out with that one. So that's the other thing that's happening here is if the DMC ends up marking this guy, it means that this guy is coming through unmarked, basically. And he's going to typically sit right at the top of the box and be unmarked. So for this player in particular, there is one very specific attribute that matters a lot, which is long shots. And this guy has 69 in long shots in our starting squad. So we're getting completely unmarked long shots from directly in front, not offset to the right, not offset to directly in front. And that's really important because the shooting angle is much better from directly in front than it is offset to an angle. So So basically, the part of the idea of this is to create the overload, have their players trying to mark these players, and then these guys this guy will arrive, maybe unmarked, maybe he does get marked, but if he's marked and this guy's marked, if these are both marked, then this guy, when he's late arriving, he's definitely not marked. He's completely unmarked. So part of this is to have the arrival of the players sort of staggered so that the defenders will pick up players to mark, but then you have late arrivers who will be unmarked as well. The other thing we can, let's say, concept we can apply here, which was one of the problems that we were, we ended up with the box-to-box midfielder. In the beginning, we were doing this as a central midfielder, and there was a tactical problem here that these players were moving in tandem, up and back together, and they were basically taking up each other's space, if that makes sense. Like, they were always near each other, and they were denying the impact that each player could have on the match. But by changing this guy to a box-to-box midfielder, it also, which was the original thinking for it, but then it created these other opportunities like the late arriver and the trap here. But one of the original reasons for doing that was to make them more offset, because this guy would track back farther typically than this guy, and he would advance forward. It would create a bit of an offset so they wouldn't be directly in a line, and that you would create more triangles for passing options in the pitch. So when we're talking about an attack where the play is passing around and you get the full build up, so to speak, what it ends up looking like is all of these guys end up joining the attack, and the deep line playmaker sort of advances around here to help a bit. So you basically end up with this like you end up with 6 forwards basically, and a central midfielder behind them as an option to lay it back to. So you end up with this complete. When you're talking about when you actually get everybody forwards, and the attack is built up properly, you end up with the ability to, and all of these guys are sort of not in a row like this. They're all staggered in different. There's a stagger to it all, so there's a lot of triangles created, and they can pass the ball around a lot and manufacture some really awesome chances, consistently awesome chances that are varied. Like a stream of different types of chances in a match, falling to all different types of players. We've had a match with the box-to-box midfielder, for example, scoring multiple goals, I think 2 goals, and another couple other great chances, not from set pieces or anything, but just from late arriving in the box, basically unmarked, and the team just laying it to him and him tapping it in. So it's a very dynamic tactic, let's say, both in regard for attacking, and then obviously it's got a very specific plan from a defending perspective. So it's not. I'd say all of that complication in defending is more about just trying to make it so that it's like the strength of this tactic absolutely is the attacking, and then the complicated defensive setup is just to try to minimize that weakness, to try to get the maximum efficiency possible from our defensive unit.
Brilliant. Right. Well, hopefully that gives people a take. I think you can probably get an idea of the amount of depth Nick goes into in these videos. Certainly in the first one, it's really interesting from that perspective. You can learn, even as an experienced user, you can learn a lot about how Nick manipulates the positioning of his players and what he's trying to do. And also, he goes a little bit more in depth in about. She's brushed over how the formation's working, but obviously these roles are not deliberate compared to what players he's put into the roles as well. They've all got those ones, we're talking starting players here. They've all got certain attributes, but most of them are pretty weak players. But you can make certain players work by giving them the correct role. So it's very interesting, and
there's a lot of stuff we didn't cover still. We didn't cover specifically why this offset, for example. I didn't come back to the defensive midfielder to explain. We didn't really talk about. We talked somewhat about the attacking transitions, but we didn't talk at all really about. We talked about the flow and the objectives, but we didn't talk about the overall defensive transition, the actual flow from when it breaks down and all of that. When we're all up, there's all this space we're conceding, like little bits that are done to minimise that a bit. There's a lot of stuff we didn't cover there. It was that are covered in the other videos. So.
Yes, so hopefully that gives you a good idea, guys. Let's. Well, the first thing Nick's obviously done is gone through the senior squad, set up a tactic to suit those players. Where did you go next, Nick?
To some degree, where the tutorial takes you, pretty much. So that would have been the next thing I did was to play in my first match, because you kind of have to do that before you can do anything else. So I played the match with those players. Obviously, this is the evolved version of it. So the very initial version of it wasn't like this, but it wasn't completely indifferent to this, if that makes sense. Like this is what the original formation evolved from. So, but yeah, I played the match, and then I unlocked the scouting pool. You have to buy one player from the scouting pool. So I just quickly went through it to buy one that I know would definitely be useful regardless, and then. End up selecting the manager skills. There is a bit of a thing with the manager skills that for new users in particular, like most of these are a bit pointless, especially for the training league. This first season, you really want to focus on building your squad up. It doesn't even matter if you win the matches, quite frankly. So we just wanted to basically get these skills. Then the next thing we did, I think, was before we did that, we intentionally didn't lock the skills in straight away because we wanted to go through the academy trials and just show how these skills help a lot, basically. So we loaded up our new academy trial, went through the process of picking the players, explaining that without these skills, and then added these skills and redid the process with the same set of players and explained how the outcomes were different there. Some of these skills just help. Like the foresight, for example, is I still cannot almost fathom how it is so cheap, because it is so powerful. Basically, like obviously not the most powerful skill. There's plenty of other skills that are more powerful, but in regards to bang for your buck, like it's crazy cheap for how good it is, and it's like and how much it helps. When you can start to consider, for example, that you can start assigning almost a monetary value to skills, for example, because the revenue, depending on what tier you're in, it gives you a percentage increase. So that skill, depending on what division or tier you're in, you can say that 4,000 manager skill points is worth this much money, and this much being 10% of your gate receipts. And at that point, you've got a monetary value assigned to this that's, and it could be $500,000, could be multiple £1,000,000, depending on where you're at in the game. And then you're sort of saying that, therefore, this equals what, £5,000 or something in the game? So like 5, 10, 15, 20, like it equals an amount of cash that's almost nothing, and yet it can help you get graduates that in the end are worth millions, tens of millions of pounds more than you otherwise could have got, and you're only paying what is effectively a few £1,000s to get the skill. And quite frankly, the graduation ones are pretty similar. I mean, yeah, they're not totally as crazy cheap, but how much these help is massive. In like, you only need one extra world-class player once every X months, basically, and all of this is just an absolute bargain if it helps you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one thing that the videos are going to be really helpful for. I mean, as far as the game is concerned, tactically, I'm certainly very average. But as far as the academy side of the game, I feel like I'm pretty good at it, and I'm fairly high up in the rankings and stuff like that. So it's definitely something that I focus on quite a bit, and I completely agree with you that the foresight skill is extremely useful if you know how to use it. So these videos are very much worth looking at. I don't know if we want to, I think probably because we want to make this video fairly quick, I don't think we need to go in depth about the manager skills, but apart from just say to, new users, certainly give it a watch. And if you can give it a watch before you've selected your skills, even better. But I don't think that's necessarily expected. But, it gives you some good tips for the next few seasons, even if not. The academy skills, maybe we could pop onto that screen, Nick, and just have a little look. Just have a really brief summary of, the kind of things you were thinking with that. Because I think it's an interesting part of the game, and there's a lot more complexities to it than I think some people probably realise.
Yeah, cool. We'll do that. I think I'll just to avoid having to come back here. The other one is these scouting pool skills. They're just really important because I think as a new user, one of the most important things is to be able to just build your squad up in the beginning, just to pick up players and from the scouting pool, and these extra players are just, give you extra chances of finding a player you need every single day. So they're just good for that. So So I think what I can do, maybe the easiest thing, I mean, if to go through the whole thing, let's explain. It's actually 2 videos. There is one where there's a video before we got the skills, and go through all the process to pick the players and come up with the 3 that we would have picked, because you only start with 3 slots, and then add, and then confirm the skills and redid the process and showed how basically this foresight skill helps. And in the end, 2 of the 3 players we picked would have been different because of that. And not only that, like way better. Basically 2 of the 3 we picked were total, almost not duds, but players that never would have hung around anyway. So can sort of try to explain a little bit here quickly, but I think if you watch those videos, let's find a really good example. So here's a good example. So there's a goalkeeper here, and he doesn't look particularly special at all, looking at this, with what the numbers that are revealed. And quite frankly, he isn't. But the very next attribute being revealed is the shot stopping. So if we wait a day, that gets revealed. Maybe it comes out as 60, and all of a sudden this guy's looking pretty good, basically. So part of the key here with these letters is they help you put the slots onto the players that the pieces of information that are the most relevant, the things that you really want to know, they are the things that you're going to know in the near-term future, imminently. And obviously you need to weigh it all up because it depends on the player and whatnot. But as to exactly what those are, but that's a big foundational basis of how we're... So this, again, centre half, he's got really high marking, but the reason in particular why we picked him is just because the tackling is coming up very soon. And then the speed is coming up. And then the aerial ability is coming up. So all of the key attributes for that player are like, it's almost like a domino. They're all the very next ones. So this player, we know, for example, that one, we will be able to eliminate him potentially very soon. And if we don't eliminate him very soon, he's probably a keeper. If for example, the tackling and then the speed and then the aerial ability, if they all come out high, it almost doesn't even matter what any of the other attributes are. We're definitely keeping him for the rest of the month. Conversely, you can have players that potentially will look really good. I don't have any ready, sorry. But in order to know for sure, you do have to wait a long time. I mean, this is an example. Like maybe, for a DMC, in order to really know if he's ever going to be any good as a DMC or not, you need to know the tackling, but you won't find that out. As this is, you're not going to find that out probably for 10, 15 plus days. So yeah, I think it's like there's a lot more to it than this, and there's very precise examples covered in the video, but it's not going to be possible to do this quickly.
Yeah,
this is just one of those ones where you can say the concept and it doesn't necessarily sound that useful or that powerful or whatever, but this is another guy, for example, that the passing is really important for an MC, and we're going to find that out very soon. But this, well, in the videos we go through by example every single player, and I think it just makes a lot more sense because you can see in practice what you would have picked without this, and now what you do pick with it, and you will also be able to see in practice on a day-to-day basis this actually working. Like there are players that you would have picked that you would be holding for days, for weeks, for 20 days even, and in the end, like, not even find out the attribute you're waiting for, and you end up removing them for some other player. So, it definitely helps you get, in the end, doing this. It allows for a substantial increase in efficiency, and that's just the letters. These extra graduate slots, they also do their own independent, massive increase in your ability to secure good players, because you get to hold 6, even if you don't want the extra, even if you only want to have 3 players in your squad for next season, the 6 slots can be really powerful just because you can hold 6 players from one day to the next. And even you'll get 6 graduated at the end, and maybe you sell 3 of them or whatever straight away, but for nothing. But you don't need to have the extra players at the end. Just being able, just that resource of being able to hold 6 instead of 3 is super powerful in and of itself.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone has a different sort of, well, I say everyone, a lot of people have different play styles in this game. I mean, I love the academy side of things, and I very much like to try and bring players through. But there's plenty of people who approach the game completely differently. They will buy and sell in the transfer market a hell of a lot, things like that. But I do think the concepts of the academy is still worth bearing in mind, even for people who like playing like in that way, because at the end of the day, even if you haven't maybe got the time to bring, the patience to bring players through, you can still sell them for a lot of money pretty early in their career, and earn money that way to fund your transfer activity. So there's lots of different options, different ways to approach it. Moving on from the academies, Nick.
Sure.
I'm guessing you probably had a quick look at your youth squad and set up that in a similar way. Probably won't spend too much time on it, but should we have a quick look and see what your thoughts were there? How did you approach the youth players?
Yeah, we can cover that. Sure. I think one thing about the general approach, which we sort of probably should have covered this at the start, but is about just what is the high level plan when you start out. Like what is the general thinking? So. Ideally, the youth squad would be playing the same tactic as the senior team. Like that is definitely something that longer term you absolutely want to be doing. You want to be selecting the academy trialists based on the types of players that you need. Your best way to get the types of players that you need to play a specific type of football is going to either be making them yourself, picking them, because you get so many, every day these are all shuffling, you get so many chances to get players that can fit the archetype of players that you want, and then also you will get to pick all of their training options through their whole career to turn them into the player that you want. So it's really important to, as far as like a style of football and a formation, a tactic, that type of thing, that it's not just your senior team. It's the academy trialists. It's the player recruitment. It's your youth team. You also get to, So I'd say that end-to-end thing is definitely something you want to work towards. However, as a new user, it's not really going to be an option. Like, we don't even have the right players for the senior team. We got to get that set up. It's something we can bear in mind, but the resources are limited. You don't have enough money to buy all of these players from day one. So for the youth team, we did the same thing, but independently. We just set up a formation that we could do with our starting squad, basically. So, and I think in this specific example, like, it's probably much more similar to the types of formations that are popular in the game at the moment. So if we talk about tactics here a bit, then at least it's probably more directly applicable to maybe help people a little bit currently in the game with their current teams in various levels. So yeah, so we did, if you watch the videos, you'll realize that we kind of set it up. We did play the friendly, but in regards to the actual matches, like, we started playing on the last day of the weekly league period and played the 12 senior matches, recorded them all, and it was a long time. So for the youth matches, we set the team up and I just started the matches, but I didn't play them, basically. With the youth, took a bit of a different approach because I just didn't, I was sick, I suppose, and already played for many hours playing all those senior matches and everything. So with the youth matches, I just set the team up to something I thought made sense. Need to bear in mind, it was based on the starting team, and you don't have that many youth players in your starting team, so you kind of really are just, it's almost like there isn't a lot of flexibility about what you can do here. You're just trying to do something that makes sense, basically. But just set up something that loosely made sense and just started all the youth matches. But then for the video, what we did is we actually reviewed, not through the lens of having watched the matches, which is definitely the better lens to do it, but we took a different approach where we looked at all the match stats, basically, to try to work out how we could improve the team just based purely on stats and nothing else. So in regards to this, for why it ended up like this, I mean, one, it's very important that your tactics have balance. This is the thing, and typically that balance is going to be created through and another thing that's really valuable is asymmetry, especially when players have strengths and weaknesses. So we talked about that a lot in the other one, but here you can see this is a defensive midfielder, and one is a central midfielder. So you want them to be offset a bit just to naturally create more triangles and more passing lanes. So you don't necessarily want these two roles, but what you do want is two different roles for your central midfielders, almost without exception. If they've both got the same role, it's almost certainly bad and is certainly suboptimal as to which two you should have. Try things out, but they should never be the same one, pretty much. So the reason why it's this side that's defensive instead of this side is just quite simply because one of our centre halves is way better than the other one, pretty much. So this guy, for example, 31 speed, 54 tackling, 12 marking, like, he's not good at all. I mean, he's alright for youth level for 18, but he's not good. The other one is older. The other one we actually bought, by the way. So this other, the other one. So I'm playing very, very far from this server. So sometimes you get delay like this, and sometimes it won't. Okay, I lost the connection. Let me just reload it. Yes. Oh, nope. Okay.
Always technical issues.
I think it's I got a really bad internet connection as well, so I got to bear that in mind.
You only have to watch our streams to.
Alright, so we're back. So, yeah, and the other guy's good, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to click on all the players, but this guy much, just generally better at everything. So, but we bought this guy. This was not in our starting team. So yeah. So we bought him for the senior team, by the way. We wouldn't really be, we bought him for the senior team. So, But originally, actually, we didn't have him, and we still had this tactic. And the guy that I showed you that was the bad guy, he was the good guy, because the bad guy was really bad. This was the other one. This was the old bad guy who's only got 27 tackling. So basically, the original genesis of this tactic was just basically we have to play this guy because this is all we got, and he's bad. Like, we do not want him attempting any tackles as the last line of defense at all. So, but at the end of the day, you're going to have bad plays everywhere. That's the thing. So it's just a case of trying to, like I said, maximize the strength, minimize the weaknesses. So that's why the defensive midfielder was on this side, just so he's naturally back a bit, and you're just going to alleviate a bit of defensive pressure on this side and increase it a bit on this side naturally, just because of that change. You can swap them around and you'll do the opposite. As to what else there, the reason why this guy's a winger is less about... it's going to also help alleviate the defensive pressure on this side, but to be honest, the reason for that is less to do with that, and it's just more to do with the fact that he's kind of his best skill as a winger is tackling, just about. Not quite, but he's good at tackling, so that's why we're happy for him to track back. I say good relatively speaking here, so for our youth team. And as far as like just being an out and out attacking winger, like he's not particularly great at that. Like he's not particularly fast. He's not, slow dribbling and someone like, so we're okay for him to be, to contribute to attacks and to come back to defend. We're okay for him. We want him to come back to defend. And again, it's about balance. It's about the fact that, that you need to have a certain amount of players defending, a certain amount of players attacking. You need a certain amount of players involved in the transitions, both to attacking and defending. So it helps get an extra body back. He is on this side that is the weakest side as well. So it naturally, again, and it creates that kind of effect where he's naturally dropping back more, he's naturally back more. This space is naturally better defended than this space. The attacks naturally going to come through this side more. And it also means when we win possession of the ball, we're naturally going to launch the attacks up this side more. This is the better attacking winger. Like, he's a better winger than the other guy. He is a bit faster. He's got decent crossing and whatever. So, he's not awesome, obviously, but he's got better movement. But he's better. He's better than the other guy. Plus, he only got 4 in tackling. So we don't want him tracking back to defend because... if anything, he's a hindrance rather than a help, if you know what I mean. If he's the one tracking back and trying to make the tackle and everybody else is letting him make the tackle, he's giving up set pieces, he's fouling. We don't want him tracking back, basically, ideally. So that's why he's attacking winger. And then outside of that, honestly, it's just... we just got this striker, so we never played any matches with him. The one that we were using was this guy for all of the youth matches. So the reason why he's a poacher is just because... can't do anything else, pretty much. He's like awesome finishing, good finishing and composure, but really, like, can't dribble, really slow, really weak, decent in the air sort of thing, but like can't pass, no vision. Like, so you don't want him trying to create his own shots. You don't want him involved in the build-up. You don't want him doing anything, but you are happy for him to shoot. So that's why poacher role. And then actually, despite all of these deficiencies, he still scored a goal a game in our youth matches, and 2 in the first youth friendly we played. So this tactic does manufacture the chances for him, basically. So could talk about it more, but why AMC and no DMC? Mostly just balance, quite frankly. At the time, the DMC that we've got here is sort of decent or whatever, but he was playing left back initially. Because we didn't have a left back, which we picked one up. So, and the AMC in particular, I just felt overall we were just lacking in. We were lacking a goal scoring threat, and we were lacking in the ability to create chances. And this guy in particular, just high finishing, high long shots, and good passing vision. So he basically 2 big weaknesses that this team had. One is basically that all of the attackers are bad. So the reason why we needed an extra AMC is because he's not particularly bad, and he does fill the void a bit in regards to the weaknesses. But also, you do have to identify the fact that at the end of the day, if you want to win matches, you're gonna have to score at least 1 goal, because if you can't score at least a goal, you're not going to win. So you need to make sure that there is enough. This is probably definitely more of a concept that can apply when you're dealing with injuries and things like that, like an injury crisis, and you changing stuff around. Like if you've got a superstar striker who's awesome, but then he gets injured and your replacement striker isn't that good, sometimes you'll need to change your tactic to have an extra attacker there, because your team just isn't threatening enough to score goals without that superstar attacking player with him gone. So basically, why an AMC instead of a DMC? It's mostly just because without that AMC there, we ain't ever scoring. And interestingly, it's it unlocks this guy a lot, because he isn't necessarily like he can just I'm not sure if that's clear why, but just having an extra player here, it creates triangles, it creates passing lanes, it unlocks the poacher, so to speak, because he doesn't have to be involved in the build-up, because this guy's sitting here in front of him, almost saying like, if these central midfielders have the ball and they want to pass it forwards, it's going to him. Whereas if he's not here, it's going to the striker who we don't want involved in the build-up. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think this is the kind of thing that people are going to get a lot from these videos, Nick. Because it's the kind of thing you think about. You don't necessarily... Everyone looks for the right attributes for the right positions. It's what is trickier, and what the very best players do is they think about how the team's going to fit together. And that's a really good example of that, I think. Because you've obviously got something out of what I think most people would not even consider playing that player with pace that low as a striker. But the way you've sort of explained is how you can get something out of him. But really, what you're doing is saying, right, we can get something out of him by allowing other players to give it to him where his strengths lie, and that's I think that's really important. So I thought that was really interesting. So that's
but
great.
It's more, I guess, it's not just allowing, so to speak. It's about both allowing that and also trying to like cut off or disallow, let's say, him getting the ball where we don't want him to have the ball. We don't want him to have the ball like in a wide area. We don't want him to have the ball where he has to beat players on the dribble and things like that. We don't want him to have the ball in isolated areas where it isn't a good shooting chance, basically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes from. Really, I know. Here you're saying you didn't watch the matches, but certainly from senior level, people are generally watching their matches, and you can really learn things like that. I think you if you watch the players, you're going, I didn't really want him to dribble there, and then it helps you think about, if you've got a winger who's, I don't know, maybe not, keeps getting tackled continually, you can think about ways to go, right, okay, how can I isolate him more, or make it so he's not getting himself in that situation where he has to beat a player all the time, and things like that. I think you only really will get by watching a match, I find. So something to consider. Yeah, I think
another thing that's just maybe interesting. We go through the stats for this team in particular, so we analyze all of the stats from them. I'm not going to obviously go through all of that, but I think some things just statistically that definitely stuck out in my mind that definitely worth remembering for this is that he was doing exactly what we wanted, which was just not really involved in the build-up play and just trying to find a good spot that was like hyper efficient. So you could make another tactic with like a striker that's you bombing it through or whatever, and he could have loads of half chances. This guy wasn't getting loads of half chances. He was getting a few high quality chances, and he was scoring them with consistency.
And I think this is somewhere you can actually, if you go into one of the results from the youth matches, Nick, you can probably outline that. I know you probably haven't prepared a particular one.
Another
but that
one,
might be a quick
I'll quickly scan them, I'll say the concepts, and then I'll find examples of these. Another really interesting one is just this guy was tracking back a lot, and there was games where he was like multiple instances, I believe, of him attempting like 5 tackles a game, sort of thing. So we were getting his tackling was mattering. He was tracking back and he was tackling as a winger. And another interesting thing from this tactic was just the sheer amount of volume that the central midfielder had to deal with. I think he had like towards or over 20 pass attempts in a match, which is like pretty insane. For a tactic that's not short passing or anything. To be clear as well, like all the sliders are just all the team instructions here are just in the middle, balanced or whatever. Definitely want to refine these over time, but to some degree they can complicate things to start with quite a bit here. Like they can sort of like quite hinder the development of a tactic when you're trying to get this fine tuning. So I prefer to get all of this sorted out and working well, and then start to deal with the team instructions. That's my preference. Obviously, like if you have in your mind that you want to play a specific type of football, that's different. But that's not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is construct the type of football we're playing around the players that we have. So, so let's find a couple examples of this. And another thing is also that I can illustrate with examples is because of these guys dropping back a bit to help, that it is indeed the case that the workload, so to speak, the defensive workload is being primarily placed on the sort of right side of these two defenders on the right and alleviating the pressure on those on the left. And it is also the case that in regards to attacking play, this guy is primarily the one carrying the sort of ball as opposed to this guy as well. And he's doing less defending. Like all of these things are happening in the stats. So, where are they? Results, youth. Results.
That's what you want.
Yeah. All right. So now we'll click on one. I'll pick one, and it won't show any of this. But we'll see. All right. So we're the away team. So he scored a goal. Okay. So he wasn't like this. Not the best example. So he did have 4 shots. I'm telling you, he doesn't normally have 4. But yeah. But still, they were all on target. Again, he doesn't have hardly. He only had 8 dribbling touches. So he doesn't really. He does get involved sometimes, like for a pass and a pass back in the build up, but he doesn't. Like the final build up where he's just getting passed into a position and he lays it back a bit to somebody, but he doesn't dribble with the ball hardly ever. What else were we saying? That this guy, again, not the best. He got 0 RPOs. We'll come up with another example of that one. Obviously, the thing is, these are about general conceptual trends across the course of many matches, not necessarily all of these things directly apply to every single match. This guy, he did attempt 20 passes in this game, like I said, so he has like a phenomenal sort of amount of workload, like 3 headers, 36 dribble touches, a tackle attempt, 6 interceptions. Like the amount of workload, we're about to perhaps quickly go back at the end why it's kind of obvious that this would be true. But this player, if you were to have one superstar player in this tactic, you would ideally have it to be him, because he's just so heavily involved that if he is a great player, you have a great player influencing many moments throughout the match.
Absolutely. I think one thing I can point out, Nick, is that it's funneling down the right side, like you say. I mean, you see the right back's man of the matches. He's won 8 tackles out of 8. The right-sided centre-backs had a couple of things to deal with, but yeah, it's that guy, isn't it? It's really funneled towards the right back. Just, as a pairing, I guess you can say, like between them, they attempted 10 tackles, and the other ones between them attempted 2. But like again, like it does, yeah. So that is a trend. Not that this is what I'm saying. Like some of these examples aren't coming through in this one match, but this one example is shining through very strongly. In other matches, obviously, it won't be as strong. Like we'll pick another example. With a home team, right? So in this example, for example, it's 4 attempted tackles on the right side and 2 on the left. Now you could say it's only two more, but you could also say it's double, if you know what I mean. So, but it's also like if you look across the other stuff, which it was, I think in the other game, the interceptions were a bit more on there. But in this game, for example, there's also a lot more interceptions being picked up on the right side than the left side. There's also no header attempts even on the left side, 3 on the right. So overall, the load is still really intense on the right side versus the left side here. And again, like interestingly, the defensive, I think this might be the only match where it happened, but he actually had more pass attempts, but still there's a big amount of pass attempt volume for our central midfielder, our MRC. And again, doing a bit of everything, if you know what I mean, like a header, a couple tackle attempts, 4 interceptions, a shot attempt, so he's sort of doing a bit of everything there. This is another example. I don't know I think I missed this in the last match, sorry, but the AML, I was saying he tracks back to defend. Here you can see 6 tackle attempts. More than anybody else. Just as many as all of our defenders put together.
left winger is tempted. So him tracking back to make tackles is definitely a thing here. And yeah, okay. You can ignore my hyper efficiency comment because he had 10 shots in this game. So
it's a different player. It's a different player, I think, isn't it? Or is it the same guy?
No, I'm not sure. Let's have a look.
Maybe I'm wrong. I thought it might.
Yeah,
it is him. Isn't it?
Okay. Not hyper efficient in every match.
He's not
obviously,
efficient
just
all.
some matches. But it is quite interesting, though, that conceptually, regardless, so that the tactic does create the chances for him, so to speak. Like how often would you have a player with that kind of speed being able to have that many chances created for them? So maybe you can. I think when I was just checking the matches, there were a couple where he had like one shot, one goal type of thing. So, but obviously it sort of depends on the opposition formation because they may be giving up a lot of space in the areas where the shooting opportunities aren't that great. So you'd have to watch. Part of the thing is there's only so much you can infer from the stats. You kind of have to watch the matches as well to sort of know everything. But you can infer something, which is what we've been doing. AML here again, 5 tackle attempts. This match, despite those other really, those examples where we have this match in particular, for example, there was more tackle attempts on the left side than the right side. So it's just about trends here. It's like you're not going to be able to just manipulate everything exactly how you want every single match. It's about percentages.
Yeah, and a lot depends on what the opposition's doing. I mean, it could certainly be they could be funneling their attacks down the right, couldn't they? I mean, I know the bot teams probably are not doing anything too strange, but certainly against other users is something to consider, isn't it? If you're trying to do stuff and the other guy knows what he's doing, he's going to be trying to do stuff as well. So,
but you can see that it was for whatever, because you don't know what the opposition team is doing, but it's pretty obvious here just looking at the stats that probably what you're saying is true. Because if you look here, for example, just focus on the left versus the right. Like the left-sided defenders are needing to do more than the right. This MRC normally has this massive load of passes. He only had 7 pass attempts this game. The AML attempted 5 tackles and had more 50 dribbling touches. The right winger only had 29. So you can already see like all the players on the left-hand side here had loads of work to do, and the ones on the right-hand side had way less, including the ones that normally have, like the MRC, for example, normally has a really big workload. And instead, this game, he kind of just looked like, well, I guess every other player. He looked very, average, for example, in regards to his workload. But you can just sort of see here in particular, the left winger had loads to do this game, both defensive and attacking. So, yeah.
Yep. Great.
Yeah. We do go through every single one of these, by the way. We look at it in depth for every single position. So
that's
for every
another
video. So,
yeah, that's another video to take a good look at. All right, so hopefully it gives you a little taster of those ones.
Yeah,
right, is there anything else you'd like to cover?
Outstanding thing for me from all of that, though, I'll just point it out, is the sheer amount of tackle attempts that the AML was making from that tactic. It's like for the player recruitment, you're saying if you were going to persist with that tactic, you're saying for the AML, one of the most important attributes for him is tackling, which is quite interesting conceptually.
Yeah. Okay. Right, Nick, anything else you'd like to go through here? Anything to do with player recruitment or anything like that? Or would you leave that to be explained in the videos?
Yeah, I mean, we cover the videos that explain a lot. Obviously, they're very longhand content, though. We are just playing the game, narrating every decision. So this is much more sort of shorthand the way that we've done this one. So yeah, I mean, it is the case, but also it's not going to be for everyone to watch all of that content. I don't know how much we're supposed to cover here, quite frankly, right now.
Okay, so I think we leave that for now. I think we've gone through quite a lot, Nick. Hopefully this gives people a little taster about the kind of content you're going to be getting in this series and whether it's for you or not. I think there's certainly stuff that I've been playing this game ages, and I'm learning stuff from the first video I've seen, and I haven't even watched the rest, but I certainly will. And I think I think everyone can learn a bit from this. But hopefully, it's useful for new users coming to the games and seeing how you can play around with the match engine. I mean, there's plenty to manipulate there, and hopefully you can build a tactic or by players that you want to fit that tactic, and go from there. Okay, so as far as the future of this this series is concerned, obviously Nick's going to carry on doing this for a little while and see what comes of it and see how popular it is. You can certainly learn a lot from it. I certainly am already, just from watching one episode. So obviously, if other streamers want to do something similar, I don't think Nick would want to get in the way of that. So he may end up wrapping the series up. But as far as what the future holds for this, I think Nick's going to carry on doing the videos, and I think I'll probably do a few like little catch-up videos here and there, like this one, small videos summary of what's been going on, and then we'll see how we're going. Okay, right. I think that's about all we're going to cover this time. So good luck in the game.